Hello again. We're back with Kim Goodman, and we're talking about raising strong families. And of course, strong families, strong kids are part of strong families. This particular topic is about whining and what to do when your young kids act up, especially in public. And why do they do that, Kim? Why do they act
Why
that
they
way?
choose the time in public?
Yeah.
I think it really comes from that they choose at home also, and it's often not dealt with. I think as moms, it's real easy to tune out the little ones when they're whining and to not deal with it. And then when you get out in public, that kind of situation is escalated, and then you have a problem. One of the things that we've learned to do is, and I learned this from Gary and Anne Marie Ezzo, Growing Kids God's Way, when our kids are whining, to, to stop and to, first of all, stop and notice that they're whining and to say, are you whining? And their response that they have to say back to us is, yes, mommy, no whine. And a lot of times, you have to look at what is causing them to whine because, like when you're in the grocery store, you're going and you're pushing and they're tired and they're irritable and they're hungry and that's going to make them whining. And so, if you can help those variables and not take them out when they're tired and be dragging them all around, um, you can help cut down those variables. But the other thing, what we do in the home, especially, which is where we see that more often I do than anywhere else, when my little ones get whiny, like I've got a 4-year-old Joy who will get whiny, and I tell her to go into her room and work on her heart until she gets a happy heart, and she can come back out when she has a happy heart. And instead of putting her in timeout, she pretty much goes and works on her own heart, and then she'll come out and she will be a completely changed and different child, and she'll stay in there into her room until she, and sometimes she's really frustrated and you'll hear her go in there and she'll and she'll be really frustrated, but she'll go in there and she'll work it out, and she'll come back and she is happy as she can be, and she comes
Wow.
back and hugs me and loves on my leg and I love you, mommy, and she's a completely changed child. So we just have her go diffuse herself, go back into her bedroom and deal with that herself. But I find that if you deal with it in the home, then you have less of an issue when you're out in public.
Okay. Well, that's good. That's well and good, Kim. But let's face it, your kids are probably better behaved than over 50% of the kids out there because you spend a lot of time with them. What happens if, in such situations, when, well, sometimes they just go out of hand completely? What advice do you have for mothers in such situations?
When they have a meltdown,
Hmm.
make sure you don't have one. When I'm in Walmart or someplace and she starts to have a meltdown, I see a lot of moms, like when you're in a Walmart situation, it seems like that's where you have kids having meltdowns all the time. I see it all the time. Um, and the parents get so upset with them and start threatening and call, if you don't stop that, and they start getting upset themselves. And I find that if I will just stop and turn my attention to her, and I don't acquiesce to, I want that or whatever, she can't have it. And I've already said that, and that's not an issue. It's a closed issue. Um, but I will reinforce to her that I love her, and I'll sit there and talk to her sweetly, and I can, instead of letting my blood pressure get up and get escalated if she starts to have a meltdown or if one of my children do, um, just talk lovingly to them and but firmly, and let them know, you know, um, that is not acceptable behavior, and you are not allowed to do that. But then you have to be consistent, and when you get home, you follow through with, if they, if you have told them something that there's consequences. I like to have natural consequences for their actions, and we're really big on that. If there is a natural consequence, that can be a consequence for their action. If they've done something, and even as they get older, if they can have natural consequences as a form of discipline, I find that that is so much more effective. But if you do make some kind of a, when you get home, da da da, you need to follow through on your actions, whatever it is. You're going to spend some time in your room, or however you choose to discipline them. Um, I think that you have to be consistent with that and not forget it and get busy when you get home and you go on about it. A lot of times, one of the older siblings will say, "Mommy, you said you were going to do this,"
Mm.
and so I'm accountable for that. And so I
What
just,
happens? What happens if you don't follow through? How does that affect the person's psyche?
oh, absolutely, the child learns that they can manipulate you
Hmm.
and that they can do this out in public, and that's why they're going to have more meltdowns. And when you said that my kids behave have better behavior than some other kids you see, that's because we really make an effort to be consistent in the home with disciplining them, and so that when you do get out in public, there aren't the issues that you would have otherwise.
Right, right. When is it okay to actually use physical punishment on a child in public?
In public,
Hmm.
I don't know that I would use physical discipline in public. Um, in the home,
Hmm.
I when we do believe in spanking, and there is biblical
Absolutely.
verses that talk about spanking, spare the rod, spoil the child. We spank in our home for disobedience, but when we spank, it's never an uncontrolled spanking. We actually have a device that we use that is flexible, and it's not even a spatula, because a spatula can leave a mark. It's not something that could leave a mark, and I give at the most 3 swats. Sometimes I'll just give 1 swat, but it's only for disobedience. And never if they accidentally broke something, they would never get a spanking for something like that. Or, but if they have willfully been disobedient, that's when they get a spanking. And, or else there are consequences. If there's another consequence that we can go with, it's very rare that I would spank. And by the time that I have an 8-year-old, a 9-year-old, by the time that age, there's no more spankings. I mean, it's just in those years, 3 to 4 to 5 years
Hmm.
old, is the main time that they would get any kind of a spanking. And so it's never in anger from our end of things, because I was spanked as a child in anger, um, and I think that you have to be very careful about not spanking in anger. And I think that if you as a parent are angry, that's not the time to spank. You have to go deal with your own anger before you can
Mm.
come back and deal with the child.
I think that's very important. Very, very important. All right. So kids need to learn that there are consequences for disobedience, and they need to have that ingrained in their thinking and their emotions really early in life, so that they don't go astray later on in life. That's good.
Absolutely, and we teach our children first time obedience. And even when we call them or whatever, we teach them, their response is, yes, mommy, I'm coming. If I call them, instead of just, yeah, or yelling from, yes,
Or
mommy,
what?
I'm coming. And they come down and find out what it is that I'm calling them for. But we teach them in life first time obedience. If we tell them to do something, there's none of this one, I'm going to count, 1, 2, that you see parents doing, because that's not teaching first time obedience.
Mm.
And it teaches them to as they grow up and as they become adults, to listen and to hear the voice of God. If they can become obedient to their parent, who's, we feel like we're their covering, that the Lord has given us to be their parent as a child, if they can learn to be obedient, then when the Lord speaks to them, they can be obedient to Him and to His voice first time, and to just listen to when the Holy Spirit is speaking to them and telling something to them in their lives, that they learn to listen, and they learn to listen to His voice, and be obedient to Him.
Fantastic. First time obedience, no whining. There are consequences for disobedience, and I think that's great. Thank you, Kim. And folks, if you want to see more presentations and more videos by Kim, go to our website, buildingstrengthwebinars.com.